Zainab, am I being clear enough? Am I talking?
I can hear you. I can hear you. I think everything is all right. I think most of the participants are already online. I think, yeah, perfect.
Okay. So what I will try and cover, I know Danu did touch on some of these things and I did hear some of his sessions, but I'm going to come from a slightly more theoretical basis, having built a lot of brands. He's more media person who's come to branding. So I'm going to take you through a little more of the theory. I will really keep it much more to behavior change communication because I think that's the challenge we have. There are different types of communication. And the particular challenge we will have is to really go into behavior change communication, which means we are trying to get groups of people around us to buy in, be sensitive, and maybe change their attitudes or their way of perceiving us or perceiving you or perceiving certain things that you're trying to express. So some of you people in this audience would be media people who are hopefully going to be catalysts of change. Some of you will be actually people who are queer or LGBT in some way, and in some way you want to express yourself and be part of the advocacy group or part of the brands that present themselves, a part of the face of people who are trying to express their stories. I'll then really take you through the importance of storytelling and the power of narrative, particularly in times, in situations like this, but either way, and give you some examples. And then I will go through a lot of really Sri Lankan examples, but examples from my brand building experience. So a lot of that is from different brands and are not related to LGBT, but the lessons and the tools are there, and I'll try and draw the parallels so you can see where they are. So I'll try and make it as interesting based on real life case studies. Go through some degree of, I'll be a bit cynical about some of the reality of what you're trying to change and the situation. I can give it to you much more from a gender perspective. But the fact that change is very difficult. I mean, women constitute about 50 or 51% of most countries in the world. And you're still finding that the World Economic Forum is going to tell you that it'll take another 125 years before we will have parity just for women. Now, you're in a whole different spectrum of issues around gender, sexuality, and disability. So it's an uphill task, but that shouldn't frighten you away, but just maybe give you a bit of a reality check of, try and win a few battles first without assuming that normalcy is going to prevail, because what normalcy anyway, I think, is something that's going to change. I gave an interview recently and said the battle up front is not going to be about men and women or any form of gender identity. It's actually down the road going to be about man versus machine and possibly about our own humanity. So it's a changing world, and we have to take that in stock in terms of the priorities of what we're messaging and what we're trying to retain. And I'll go through some stories about naming, branding strategy, onboarding media, culture and context, a few fact sheets, and of course, come into one of my pet topics, which is really about how you use the arts effectively, and maybe share a few role models or examples. So to move on, what is a brand? I'm sure
නාම பெயர் என்றால் என்ன? தனு அதை கொஞ்சம் செய்து
ගැන කතා කරන්න ඇති. නමුත් මං කෙටියෙන් මගේ මේ ගැන මගේ
many people describe a brand to be, but a brand is really a sum of stories we tell or are told and heard and perceived. Now, it could be about ourselves if it's our brand, as in our personal brand, but it could be about a product, a service, or a person. And the important thing is it doesn't operate in a vacuum. It operates within a social and cultural context. And that social and cultural context, particularly when it comes to issues like what you all are grappling with, uh, it's it's very, very difficult, and it's not going to be easy in terms of unraveling the situation in which you operate in, both mentally, physically, environmentally, even just among your inner community, your parents, your inner circle, your religious culture, and all of that. So to a certain extent, we are limited to how we control the product, in this case ourselves, by how we are wired, how we are, our genetic inheritance, and how we look and how we feel. But I don't agree with something Danu said earlier, and related to the fact that consistency is the given in brand communication. I think everything in the world is in a state of flux. I think that I am not the same person I was when I was young. I think there's some equity and some continuity, but I think we are constantly changing, and that change is a part of a choice. The manifestations of what we want to be, how we want to be, how we want to express it, how happy or how sad. Some of it is, yes, some of it would be because of who we are and our mental framework, but some of it we might be able to control. So given that, how do you want to project yourself? That's the most important thing. Zainab, by any chance, were you able to circulate that one sheet of paper I wanted shared? If not, could it be shared now?
I have actually shared it in the resources folder that I have given access to all fellows. I am hoping that they have all read them, but I think maybe we should also put it up as well.
Yes, by any chance, do you have it, and can you put it up, or do you want me to?
You're sharing the screen right now, so maybe I share.
Okay, can it be circulated, because it's something that they are, well, everybody, if you can find that, it is a questionnaire about trying to figure out who you are. And central to how you want to communicate about yourself is really a kind of self-reflection on who you are and what you want to be, what are the priorities. And it has a sort of a 10 square grid which asks you to juggle around priorities till you get a fit on what you want to be. If you haven't done it, I don't suggest you try and do it now, but do try and do it, and I'm available at any point if you want to discuss it. But it's more for you. It gives you a framework of trying to understand. Anything, there is always something. I talk of your equity, are your strengths and your weaknesses, and then you try and work around it. Whatever your identity, whatever your sexuality, these things hold true. And you try and build up on some things that you want to express, and you try and work around, or you mitigate some of the issues, weaknesses, things. It could be temper, it could be the fact that you're highly emotional, it could be various things. Whatever it is that you want to reduce or underplay versus what you want to build on. So personal branding is really is the process of developing a mark or an identity, and it's created around a name or a brand or a person. And you can think of personal branding which have come from products which have used faces of people. And I'll take you through one iconic one in particular, who happens to be one of my personal heroes, and someone who used gender and sexuality very early in terms of establishing identity. But a funny story is really the fact that a brand is something that started off in terms of somebody using and putting a mark on a cow or an animal to be able to say, this is mine and it's not my neighbor's, so don't steal it. So it was a mark of ownership, of possession, and how, as we became, we moved from hunters to farmers and to people that started looking after livestock, we evolved, there was this mark. And there's an insight from that. Ultimately, it is some form of ownership which is trying to identify and say, this is mine, or this is what I stand for, or something like that. Let's take something close to the to what the topic is today, and look at the concept of the rainbow icon. Have you ever thought about it? Never thought, is that a good one? Why have they chosen that? The history of it, how did it come about? I'm going to really hope someone will interrupt and talk to me back so I get a sense as which that I'm just nattering on. Anyone got any thoughts about the icon of the rainbow flag?
Yes, ma'am. I thought it's showing the diversity, for that they are using the rainbow colors.
Yes, very good. Yeah, yeah, it is. It is about diversity. Started somewhere in the, I think, 1978 or so. They were going for a march, protest march, and they wanted a banner to stand under, and they were fighting for rights. And yes, the thinking behind it was, you know, a lot of people in society, media, and in those days it was far worse. Everybody sort of has, at best, if they're trying to understand the community, and it's more than one community, communities of people who are, you know, grappling with identity issues related to their gender identity. They try and put them into, at best, a kind of, I feel sorry for them, you know, and I think Bhumi discussed some of these issues related to karma and things like that earlier on. Yeah, so the deliberate act of trying to be positive and come out with something chirpy, right? Because the history of identity markers are horrible. During the Nazi time in concentration camps, they made all the people who were gay wear a pink triangle as a shame marker, right? So some people took the pink triangle, which was upside down, and tossed it the other way up and used it as an identity marker of defiance later on. But it had a wretched history and baggage as it was. So they moved it out, and somebody developed this, and this stuck. And if I can bring it much closer home with a story on this, I've got to tell you where I first started my career as a communicator. I'd just come out of university. And the very first campaign, it's very interesting. I'm now tail ending my campaign. I'm back talking to the Family Planning Association. But the very first campaign that I broke my teeth on, as it were, was with the Preeti campaign, the famous family planning campaign, which has become a global benchmark in many parts of the world for how good it was in terms of creating awareness and getting people on board. So initially, the brand name they chose, and this is where names matter, the brand name they chose was Seema, S-E-E-M-A. So Seema in Sinhala means what? Somebody? Anybody knows what Seema means?
Is it boundary?
Limits, yeah.
Boundaries, limits, exactly, right? So then somebody else said, you know what, Sirima is in Pa, maybe that's also not good. Or someone will think, oh, she's just gone out of Pa. But anyway, you know, that wouldn't be good because there'll be a lot of lewd jokes about the female prime minister and a condom that was called Seema. But the biggest research, when they did the research, and this is where research is important, to know your audience, know what they feel. And again, it's a question I saw in one of the Q&As that some of you asked, is how do you know whether you're portraying the right thing, whether you're framing yourself way and people are getting the right messaging. So in early research, when they did a couple of names, they found that there was a lot of negativity around Seema, so the boundaries, because it's true, right? In a way, you're curtailing a life by using a condom. And that brought out all the negativity and everything and the fear. While Preeti, which was joy, right, and happiness, was a positive branding. And while some said, what's the logic in that? Why would you say, well, it's a happy moment, you're making love, but you at the same time, maybe you want to plan your family out. And so the name that was chosen was Preeti. And either because of that and because of a lot of other reasons, anyway, it became a huge success in terms of how it was expressed and marketed. So names do matter, and feedback on what your name is or what your positioning or your expression matters. Now, this is very, very complicated, and I'm just going to quickly rush through it. It's actually a model that I created somewhere when I was with Interbrand. Interbrand is the world's largest brand consultancy, and they've got a huge amount of methodology. But I thought it's very important if you really are concerned about trying to navigate identity, particularly of an issue of a person that anyway society doesn't understand, right? Because we've been born with this kind of binary logic of either you're a boy or a girl, what are you kind of thing, and nobody understands all these in-between spaces, right? And then on top of that, so there's social values, there are customs, there's religion, and then there are all sorts of things which could be, as you say, there could be metaphors, there could be marks, there could be a history related to a certain color, to various things. All these things come together, and this whole I think it's like an onion. There are layers and layers and layers of complexity that make up a whole. It's not as simple as we think. So if someone thinks it's just about, let's go and put on something of 140 words on Twitter, or let's go and create a website, or let's start a talk show. If you're really trying to strategize and build brands and create communication that can move people, there is a huge amount of science to it. So one of the issues around this, also in terms of what we are trying to do with gender identity, is the understanding of an iceberg theory, cultural iceberg theory. A famous writer who Hemingway, who was also gay incidentally, had writer's theory iceberg. But have any of you heard of the cultural theory of the iceberg?
Hey, fellows, I know everybody's kind of sleepy after lunch. Oh, they just texted me saying they don't know. Oh, wow.
Okay, I'm going to play this then for you, just for a little. I won't overcomplicate it. I'll get into more simple stuff, but just to give you an overview.
Like an iceberg, there are roots and aspects of culture which are visible, which in other words occur at the surface of the water. These can include language, food,
I don't think we can hear it, Shehara.
You can't hear it?
A bit louder, maybe. I mean, I can hear it, but just a bit louder if it's possible.
easy to see, taste, or hear. According to the theories of the iceberg, the majority of culture, like an iceberg, lies beneath the surface. These aspects are not immediately visible. These can include
Not heard?
religion, spiritual beliefs, concepts of
Very faintly, Shehara.
Okay, so I'll stop it.
respectful. Values, feelings, and thoughts.
Oh, can you hear now?
Any better?
Yeah, much better. Is everyone else can hear this? Oh, I think it's going on.
It's much better than
No matter. I've got another chart on it. So basically what it says is that there is only a certain amount of anything that's manifest outside in a culture. So if you take a person, even, what you dress, what you wear, those sort of things will be manifest outside. But the inner person isn't there. In a culture, it's even worse, right? So there are lots of things that you don't see explicitly related to attitudes, beliefs, expectations, those sort of things. Outside, all you see are some markers. So navigating what is in the subconscious or below the surface, in issues like behavior change, if it's issues of trying to win over people who have hard-grained notions of what is right and wrong, or what is unnatural, are things that you are constantly grappling with. Let me try and give you a simple example of how culturally ingrained we are. So I come from an upbringing that's very artistic in some ways. My mom was an artist, my dad was an intellectual, so they were kind of, we could openly talk about sex or whatever. I mean, I was an orphan by the time I was 19, but I had a very liberal and sort of more westernized. I don't have very traditional values. But then I was brought up by my grandparents who were much more conservative. But I remember as a what I thought was an extremely progressive person, going out, I had now become a mum. When you become a mum, you flip a bit. I think you become a little more conservative on some things for your children, while you may not be that. So, I mean, some of my best friends are all gay, and I've totally, absolutely, I wouldn't think that I have any notion of anything but total love and respect for anyone who is in any part of this spectrum of identity. But I remember a friend of mine who came, a school friend of mine, and she's what I'd call a real, one of these fuddy-duddy accountant type people who, she was always goody two-shoes, very conservative. She had gone to Australia and she came home and she brought her little son. So I would have had a, 3-month-old baby and a 3-year-old son or something. And she brought a 4-year-old boy or something. And the boy walked in with a doll. The boy was playing with a doll. At which point I turned around and said, wow, that's very brave of you. And as I said it, I wanted to bite my lip, but I thought, you know what? I'm speaking what is true to my mind, that for all my progressiveness, I don't know whether I would have had the guts to let my son just play. I mean, if he picked it up, yes, of course, because there's an angi also, but I wouldn't give him a gift of a doll. And then I wondered why, because I don't think there's anything wrong with if a boy turns out to be gay or a girl turns out to be gay, whatever it is. So what was the issue? What was holding me back? And I actually sat and I had a sleepless night over it, thinking, how could I be so, conventional even to make that remark? But the truth is that I suppose we fear for our children the way we don't. So I might have ended up gay, but I would worry that maybe my kids, if they grow up and they become so those are the kind of things you're dealing with. Okay, think then they won't have children, or they will be ostracized in society, or they will have carry more pain. All true, all true. So when you love someone, you are even more protective towards the way they mold themselves, or you think they want to mold. I mean, I consciously after that made sure that they played with dolls or anything else, because I know, I have read enough to know the toys we give our children, all these things mold you towards greater sensitivity. Even just forget anything else, it just makes you nurturing, helps you be a better human being. But these are the things you grapple with between explicit and implicit. Sometimes we don't even know ourselves what's going on inside us in terms of our attitudes. So that comes to the main issue around here. In the aspect of communicating identity, an identity which is perceived by society to be controversial, one doesn't have to be apologetic. One doesn't have to be overly aggressive. One doesn't have to be over the top, anything. One has to be what one is, ideally, right? But that what is could be perceived by somebody else as anyway being extreme or over the top or something else, or whatever it is. So how do you manage that persona at the same time being conscious that if you are using mass media, if you're even if you are in social media, you'll have this issue that there are all sorts of people who get onto any line of communication. So you get the good, the bad, and the ugly. You get people who are totally homophobic. You get somebody else. You can say, you know what, I don't care, and you just get in and you create a whole storm around it. Or you say, you know what, uh, like some feminists have, like various people have, you also say, you know what, I will make a success of my life. I will be who I am, but I will not try and be so concerned about how they perceive me for now. First, I will show them that I am second to none. I am still an amazing human being. I believe in myself enough to project it. I know there are other issues and mentally screwed up maybe, or I'm sad about issues, but I will somehow try and make something of myself so I can prove them wrong. There is nothing wrong with me, and I'll show them how successful I can. So you see role models in anything where you have ambassadors, where you have people. Society loves success. Society loves people who are achievers. So if you can be that, it's not always easy because you're being more and more ostracized, you're being more and more marginalized. But if you could, it certainly is, you're going to push more people believing you, not feeling sorry for you, and not being worried and saying, you know what, a perfectly normal, perfectly successful, perfectly happy person. What is the problem? So with that, I have to get into some issues, and please jump in, all of you who understand the nuances of this far better than me. But because there's media also out there, and I did notice when Zainab did ask some of you, please, what's your preferred pronoun? I sensed that some people opted out, partly because they didn't understand what the hell she was asking for, right? Because for some straight people and others, there's no issue. We don't necessarily dwell over what someone's going to call us. But the spectrum of issues that this is a model used by many people discussing LGBT identity, or LGBTQI, or whatever the initials you want to put on it, is that the gender identity that is a spectrum which can go from woman to man and has, you know, all sorts of shades around it, and that identity is how you in your head think about yourself. It is something that you know, as growing up, most of us are socialized, as I said, to the binary idea of a boy and a girl. And that's how we try and operate everything, you know, whether it's schooling, whether it's form filling, whether it's going to a hospital. It's changing in some parts of the world. Now there are sensitizing programs and videos. Many of you in the media can see what they're doing out in the UK and places where all medical professionals have to understand that it's not as simple as that. And even biological sex there are issues related to chromosomes, there are physiological issues, there are the issues, and it's not as clear cut. It's not just somebody has got up one day and says, you know what, I was born a boy, but I want to be a girl, or whatever it is. It's not as simple as that. And that one's sexuality and one's identity are two separate issues. And we try and understand this as we get to understand things more. So there are ideas related to gender identity, gender expression, biological sex, and sexual orientation that especially you in the media need to understand. And I hope at some point, Zainab, you'll put a small toolkit together in proper translation to where people understand these things. I would say at some level, don't overcomplicate it, but these are necessary fundamental ideas that people have to understand. So sexual orientation particularly.
We are actually currently, I'm so sorry for interjecting.
Yeah,
We are
good.
actually currently making a manual, and we will be using all the experts' curriculums to create this manual, and indefinitely we are going to be adding all of this for the fellows. We've already sent it to them, so but we have much more to update in terms of the content. So yeah,
a small toolkit, toolkit with some of the words, and then maybe just talking around it so people get it. Because there are videos out there, but they bore you to hell because they go on and they're not very well done. So now let me come to something lighter. How many of you have heard of Body Shop and have bought anything from Body Shop or have seen the brand?
Yes, we have.
1, 2, 3.
I have.
Maybe like hands up if like put your hands up if you do have a, not hand, like as in one of the, if you do. I mean,
Right. Okay, so Body Shop is a very, very interesting story. It's moved somewhere very different now. So if you Google Body Shop now, you won't find the story I'm going to tell you. I have an article I wrote in the early days because she was one of my heroes. So Anita Roddick is the lady who started this brand. And she was amazing. She really took on the whole concept of sexuality at a very early stage. So she was up against a different thing. Okay, so she wasn't working related to sexual identity so much as gender identity, and she was totally, pardon my language, but I think it's good to use the word, pissed off really with the whole way people are being molded with the idea of Barbie dolls. So I don't know how many of you, but some of you for sure wouldn't know what a Barbie doll is, right? So the Barbie dolls were these real twiggy-like, women who generally had like very small waists and were, by and large, perfectly looking in that era. And she conducted research. So it was all about being your own self, be who you are. That is a positioning, right? Dove stole it many, many years later in the way Unilever tends to steal other people's campaigns. But the original thinking related to building a brand which was going to be kind of an icon for feminism in the early days. It had a lot more because it was concerned about the planet, about suppliers, about all those sort of things, organic. But at the core was a very, very strong idea about womanhood and identity. So she conducted a research, and it was fascinating research. So the research found out that actually fat women or women who are oversized make far better partners in bed. They were sexually far more, they had far more. Then while these pretty, sort of stick-like women were very narcissistic. They were in self-love and they couldn't love other people so well. And they were actually bad in bed, right? They may look gorgeous, but they were bad in bed. And so she created a model which looked really like a Michelin woman, because she was a woman with fat thighs and had bulge on the stomach and everything, and that was kept in all her storefronts. And she said, be just comfortable in who you are, because it's far more important to be happy, to be positive, to live your life to the fullest and be whoever you are. Don't starve yourself and don't become anorexic or don't become something else. If you're fat, be fat. If you're thin, be thin. If you're whatever you, and so be who you are. In the gender rights movement was the beginning of this. In fact, Mattel, who owned the brand, eventually sued her and tried to sue her for what she was doing to Barbie. I think she won the case. Eventually, I think they somehow arm twisted her and she's moved away a little. I mean, she does this love your body stuff and things. But now the messaging is 20, 30 years on. It's not there in terms of going on so much. Dove tried to bring on some of it in one of their campaigns about 20 years later, but it's different. So here's a story of a brand who's trying to express something that was about gender rights and women, but it gives you ideas about what you might do if you want to build a commercial brand, but still have certain values with project related to gender identity or your sexuality or stuff like that. Okay, now behavior change communication. That's the other thing, right? In normal advertising, it's different. You're just trying to tell someone, buy this soap, buy this cake, buy this Coca-Cola, do something, and you build values around it. Sometimes, yes, you're asking them to, if they were normally having one cool drink, you're asking them to have 2 or 3, but not major changes. So behavior change communication becomes really exciting when you're trying to teach people things about healthcare, I did some very, very interesting campaigns, which I don't mind sharing with some of you down the road, related to the Pan Commonwealth Network on HIV/AIDS. And that is, first you go through different levels of first trying to create some broad awareness about what the issue is. Then you give them a little bit of knowledge. Then you try and make them reflect and contemplate, and then slowly move towards an intention. In this case, intention may be tolerance or liking or acceptance or something. It doesn't mean, everybody has to become that, but they have to understand that there is dignity in these type of people. One can't be violent against them, and whatever else one wants to say, and to accept them and love them or love you for what you are. And then sometimes it's do a couple of other actions like
Hello?
media.
Namarava? Okay.
Yeah. So sometimes there's an action you want to do, and all the media around here, there would definitely be things that you want them to do around their conviction once they buy into your story. Okay, so let me start anyway.
நான் அடுத்து ஆரம்பிக்க விரும்புவது
So this is a good example of when you're trying to talk and you're trying to communicate, and there are other things that intrude in. Someone has kept their mic on, but that's okay. It's also part of communication to try and work away from the noise and chatter and the other things that distract you. So two of the greatest communicators of all time have been Christ and Buddha. And why do I say that? They both use the device of the story, the Jataka story and the parables, which usually have some kind of moral to it, in storytelling. Give me a minute. I'm just trying to shift this. Yeah. So the thing with storytelling is that there is scientific. Again, I'm not going to get into it. But when a listener hears a story, there is a way in which you start vicariously, or in some way you identify it. Some way you can relate to it in that imaginary or in that hypothetical case sometimes, and you get involved in the story. Versus if somebody just puts facts down. Does anybody know who's talking? Huh?
இப்பொழுது சரியா கேட்கிறது
I think it is situated in the English channel.
Okay, sorry. Is it coming through to you guys?
Sorry for disturbance. Okay, மன்னிச்சு கொள்ளுங்க இப்பொழுது.
Could you just find out what this problem is?
Yeah. Well,
இப்ப தொடருங்க. இந்த பிரச்சனை தீர்க்கப்பட்டு விட்டது. அது பிரச்சனை தீர்க்கப்பட்டு விட்டது. தொடருங்கள். அதாவது ஒரு உணர்ச்சி பூர்வமான ஒரு தொடர்பாடல் ஒரு கதைக்கு ஒருவர் செவிமடுக்கின்ற பொழுது இந்த யுஎன் வெளியிடுகின்ற சில விடயங்கள், அதே போன்ற அபிவிருத்தி அடைந்த நாடுகள் வெளியிடுகின்ற சில செய்திகள் போன்றவர்களை பார்க்கின்ற பொழுது அதில் ஒரு மனித அக்கறை கலந்த விடயங்கள் இல்லை. அது ஊடகத்திலிருந்து வருகின்றவர்கள், அதாவது வெளியை உருவாக்க விரும்புகின்றவர்கள் நீங்கள் உங்கள் கதைகளை எழுதி சமர்ப்பிக்கின்ற விதத்தில் ஒரு ஆக்கத்திறனை வெளிப்படுத்த வேண்டும். சில நேரங்களில் அவர்கள் ஒரு கிராஃபிக்ஸாக செய்கின்றார்கள், அவர்கள் ஒரு சங்கீதமாக இசையாக வெளிப்படுகின்றார்கள். சில நேரங்களில் அவர்கள் சிலவங்களை சுருக்கமாக சொல்லுகின்றார்கள். எதுவாக இருந்தாலும் நீங்கள் ஒரு தொடர்பான விஷயங்களை ஒன்று செய்து சிறப்பாக முன்வைக்க வேண்டுமானால் விளங்கிக் கொள்ள வேண்டிய விடயம், அதாவது இந்த ஞாபக சக்தியை தூண்டி அதை ஞாபகப்படுத்துகின்ற விதத்தில் அந்த தொடர்பாடல் அல்ல இந்த கதை அமைய வேண்டும். அந்த செய்தி அவர்களுக்கு கேட்க வேண்டும், அதே போன்று அவர்கள் விளங்கிக் கொள்ளப்பட வேண்டும். நான் இந்த பிளான் இன்டர்நேஷனல் அமைப்புக்காக செய்த ஒரு விடயத்தை இங்கு நான் சொல்ல விரும்புகிறேன். சுனாமியின் போது நான் நான் ஒரு உபாயத்தை உருவாக்கி கொடுத்தேன் ஒரு விளம்பர நிறுவனத்திற்காக. பிளான் இன்டர்நேஷனல் என்னை நாடியது ஒரு புத்தகத்தை தயாரிக்க ஒரு புத்தகத்தை தயாரித்தார்கள் என்று நான் ஒரு போஸ்டர் அல்லது ஒரு சுவரொட்டியை சுனாமி தொடர்பாக தயாரிக்க வேண்டியிருந்தது. நான் நினைத்தேன், யோசித்தேன், அவர்கள் அந்த பிளான் அமைப்புடன் பணம் இருந்தது, அவர்கள் சில விடயங்களை வெளிப்படுத்த விரும்பினார்கள். அவர்கள் ஒரு இங்கிலீஷ் பெண்மணி, ஒரு இங்கிலீஷ் சிறுமி, அவர் அந்த ஒரு இங்கிலீஷ் சிறுமி, ஆங்கில சிறுமி சுனாமியை அந்த ஜன்னலுக்கூடாக ஒன்று கூட பார்த்தவர். அவர் பெற்றோரிடம் ஒரு விடயத்தை வலியுறுத்தி கேட்டார். அவர் குறிப்பிட்ட ஒரு ஹோட்டலில் அவர் இருந்தார். அந்த சுனாமி நேரத்தில் அனைவரும் ஓடி ஒழிக்க வேண்டியிருந்தது. அந்த சிறுமியும் தனது உயிரை காப்பாற்றிக் கொண்டார். அவர்கள் இந்த அறிவு என்ற விடயம் உயிரை காப்பாற்றும் என்ற அந்த செய்தியை பரப்ப விரும்பினார்கள். அந்த விடயத்தை வெளிப்படுத்தி ஒரு போஸ்டரை செய்ய விரும்பினார்கள். அவர்கள் அந்த பாடசாலை பிள்ளைகளுக்காக இந்த சுவரொட்டியை பரப்ப விரும்பினார்கள். நான் இந்த விடயம் தொடர்பாக சற்று சிந்தித்து நான் ஒரு கணிசமான அளவு ஆராய்ச்சி செய்து நான் கண்டறிந்தேன், இந்த சிறு பிள்ளைகள் இந்த விடயத்தினால் மனவடுவுக்குட்படுத்தப்பட்டிருந்தார்கள். அந்த ஆசிரியர்கள் மற்ற இணையவர்களும் அந்த துன்பியல் விடயங்களை ஜீரணித்து அதுக்கு பதில் நடவடிக்கை எடுக்கக்கூடிய விதத்தில் இருக்கவில்லை. இந்த கலந்துரையாடலின் போது நாங்கள் சிலருடன் கலந்துரையாடல்களை நடாத்தினோம். சில கல்வியலாளர்களுடன் நான் ஒரு கருத்தை முன்வைத்தேன். ஒரு புத்தகத்தை நாங்கள் வெளியிடலாம் என்று. அது ஒரு ஆக்கபூர்வமான ஒரு புத்தகமாக இருக்க வேண்டும். ஒரு அந்த அழகான கேலி சித்திரங்களை வரக்கூடிய சில ஓவிய கலைஞர்களை சந்தித்து அல்லது கண்டுபிடித்து அதே போன்று ஆலோசனை வழங்குகின்ற சில ஆசிரியர்களையும் நாங்கள் பயன்படுத்தினோம். நாங்கள் பொதுவான சில விடயங்களை பற்றி எழுத விரும்பினோம். பொதுவாக ஒரு சிறுமியை ஒரு பிள்ளையை பற்றி கதையொன்றை எழுதுகின்ற பொழுது நாங்கள் ஒரு மதகுருவிடமையும் கருத்தையும் பெற்று அந்த மதகுரு அந்த சுனாமியை பற்றி தெளிவுபடுத்தினார், விளங்கப்படுத்தினார். நாங்கள் ஒரு விடயத்தை நாங்கள் விளங்கி கொண்டோம். அந்த பௌத்த மதகுரு, கிறிஸ்தவ மதகுரு, மதகுருமார்களை நாங்கள் பேட்டுகின்றோம். அது ஒரு அர்த்தமற்றதாக இருந்தது அவர்களுடைய கருத்து. சில இடங்களில் நாங்கள் ஒரு ஆசிரியரை சந்தித்தோம். நாங்கள் அந்த பிள்ளை, அந்த சிறுமி, அந்த பிள்ளை நாயை தொலைத்து விட்டார். எனவே நாங்கள் அந்த நாயை தொடர்புபடுத்தி இந்த கதையை உருவாக்க விரும்பினோம். இறுதியாக அந்த புத்தகம் உருவாக்கப்பட்டது. இருப்பினும் எங்களுக்கு நாங்கள் சில விளையாட்டுகளையும் அதை நாங்கள் சேர்த்து கொண்டோம். அந்த மனிதர்களை பற்றி நாங்கள் ஒரு வழியை கண்டறிந்து 3 மில்லியன் பிரதிகளை நாங்கள் ஆசிரியர்கள் பயிற்சி போன்ற விடயங்களை தொடர்படுத்தினோம். நாங்கள் பின்னர் அந்த நிகழ்வுக்கு பின் ஒரு ஆராய்ச்சியை செய்தோம். அங்குள்ள பிரச்சனை என்னவென்றால் நாங்கள் மிகவும் அக்கறை எடுத்தோம். இந்த விவரங்கள் தொடர்பாக நாங்கள் கலந்து ஆலோசனை நடாத்தினோம். அதே போன்று நாங்கள் விளங்கிக் கொண்டோம்.
That sometimes even if you gave it to the education ministry, they would have done nothing, and it would have taken, we found out it took 1.5 years to get dispersed out of that system. So then we broke the system and we found an extra class in curriculum where you don't have to go through the curriculum reform committee. So we could get it done in 3 months. We got our own vehicles and we dispersed it. We went to every regional center and we trained. So it became something more than just a poster done and dusted, tick a box and move on. So that's the issue in these sort of things. The storytelling is important, but all the level of detail in the story and the nuances related to cultural acceptance and everything is important. I'm going to stop there for a bit before I natter on and just ask Piol, if there are any questions you'd like to ask me up to now.
Put your hand up if so, then we could call you out.
Hi, Shehara. It's Minoli here.
Yes, Minoli.
So I have a small question for you. You may be talking about this in the next few minutes as well. So what I want to ask is that how do you have any pointers for us as content creators on social media to use in order to reach out to the more conservative audience?
Yeah, so my simple answer is you have to break it down to demographics and to what kind of forums you'd go, right? Because just sitting and having a site and expecting conservative people to come into your, say, an LGBT site or something like that would be pretty ridiculous. People gravitate towards their own levels of interest and their own things, right? So you're not going to reach them necessarily, but assuming you have the right media placement strategies and you are going into and able to get into conversations in your parent teachers associations, or I don't know, into religious groups or other areas, and you were trying to now get into conversations with them, I think you have to start from feel good stories. I'm oversimplifying it. There could be human interest stories, there could be tragic stories, but you have to keep it fairly simple and you have to understand what you're trying to do with it. Are you just saying stories for story's sake? Are you trying to build? So say you've got a campaign which is confidence building. So confidence building could be to the community, but also to the parents and the loved ones who in some way are hurting. They're now in somewhat passively, most parents don't actively, but because of their love for their children, when they realize that their children are queer or whatever they tend to at some point say, I love you too much, I'll stand by you even though I don't understand a word. Some, of course, will never accept it. Now, then it's a matter of how do you hold those conversations. So I come later with some techniques about the layering of this, and it'll start with, well, I can give you an example of something I did once within my school group, which was social media, right? So one of it is, I suppose you all have all heard of Taru, right? Have you heard of Taru? Anyone knows Taru?
I don't think so.
Taru, like Taru Vilas?
Taru.
Yeah.
So Taru is gay, and Taru is a very dear friend of mine. And Taru is a classmate of mine. So anyway, she has become an icon, and she also, I know her parents and her community and everything. And Ladies College is in itself is a fairly elite school, but still an utterly conservative Christian school. And 8 out of 10 parents would be very conservative related to these issues on sexuality and everything else. So somebody asked me to be a compeer of their Christmas thing, and I just out of my quirky nature, or either way, because I tend to be contrarian, not because I was really pushing an agenda. I said, yes, shall we do something unusual with Santa Claus? Why does Santa Claus have to be a man? Why can't Santa Claus be someone in drag? And because it was Taru, and I said, let's get Taru to be Santa Claus and let her do a drag act. Now, for this deeply conservative Christian school to allow Santa to be, and then I had to explain some facts that actually Santa Claus is red in color purely because Coca-Cola in the early years decided that their brand color is red, and nobody knew what color Santa was in those early days. And after that, everybody on the planet who knows who Santa Claus is assumes that Santa Claus is red, but Coca-Cola made Santa red. So I said, you know what? This is a figure, a symbol of it's a story, but we can modernize it. Let's make it a woman, or let's make it someone who's queer. What does it matter? And let's have some fun with it. And they were open to it. So it's I don't know, you have to find every opportunity, every space, any forum, but I would imagine some of these conversations, like even this training, would be far more fruitful if we were closer together, because then we could see facial expressions. Those of you who are shyer would be able to speak. I can understand, and from your body language, I'll know if I'm just talking too much. Same with these things. You'll have to put little, make it small stories, make it interesting, and slowly seed it into different groups. Otherwise, what happens is you tend to talk in an echo chamber, which is you're talking to your own community of people who already understand something about it, because they will come to an LGBT site. Does that make any sense?
Yes, Shehara, thank you so much.
Okay. So one of the other issues is communication. Or is there another question? Sorry. Shall I move on?
The ones who have their hand up, I think have a question.
Yeah,
Hey, go
Sanjay.
ahead. I can't see the. Let me see.
No, there are two people with their hands up. So kindly Sanjay, go ahead, and then
yes.
Isha.
Okay, fine. Shehara, මට දැන් කියන්න පුළුවන් නම් දැන්
Shehara, can you tell me now when we take mainstream media, they cover certain topics, certain brands, and then you know that there are certain limitations. So when it comes to talking about LGBTIQ community, mainstream media, you know, there is very limited opportunities of space in mainstream media, mainly because they are they have this mentality about how to brand these things. So with your experience, can you share your experience regarding how the Preeti brand was used? What kind of strategies were used to bring Preeti into mainstream media? Practically, like what were the things that were done? I think that would be very useful. Sanjay, Preeti was done some time back. The government also gave approval, the family planning. It was a big development endeavor. So if you have the money, if you pay, the program can be implemented. So because after all, these are educational stuff. So these things, there are methods, there are strategies. Even ultimately, you know, it's money. So no matter what media outlet it is, it can be done. Even now there are, you know, even now when it comes to most things, they are just ticking boxes. They don't really, they might tell you to do some things, but for example, like Danu mentioned, you may not be able to, they might block out certain words such as dick or penis. Sometimes, you know, they censor sex scenes in some channels. But look at tobacco people. How do they market their cigarette? When they can't show a cigarette, they used many strategies, dark marketing strategies are there. There are so many things that can be done. So I think first you have to have good spokespersons, role models. You need to have some creative solutions. In particular, now I think on the 17th, you have the Gay Rights Day. So you having features, having supplements, you know, actually doing them on these days. You can do podcasts, videos, that sort of thing online. And when you have an audience, you don't have to search for brands. There are certain fashion brands and other brands. They are not afraid. They will support this kind of cause. So that is how you have to start. My Sinhalese is not so good, but I think you understood me.
Hi, can you? Hi, I'm Ishan here. Can, yeah, I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, I can.
This is what I do YouTube videos. And now this is what usually we relate brands with sort of like sellable products, like let's say a beverage or a dress or something like that. So I do YouTube videos, and my question is, how can I build a brand by using videos as using social media?
So there are lots of ways, Ishan, you can. Now, I did a whole campaign out in Malaysia for a brand called Volkswagen, right? Volkswagen also believes in that they want to be a little like from that Volkswagen car, the way it was built, the original Beetle. They want to use humor. They want to use have characters, people who have like are their own person, like they might wear mismarriage socks, or they might wear funny hats. So there are people who have some personality, and that's part of the brand personality. So Ekata, for example, they use videos as an entire campaign. Actually in Germany, and that became a huge campaign. Every morning there was a new campaign, Mr. Bean learning to drive the car or something like that. But it was always the car there, right? So eventually every day one little part of this, under 5 minutes or 2 minutes or 30 seconds or whatever it was, 1.5 minutes, little stories. First he's reversing, then he's crashing, then something else happens, and the next door comes, whatever, and it's all based on humor. But everybody got used to, hundreds of thousands of people start thing and sharing it and making it viral. So you have to find, even through video, if you story tell and you have a series and it's of interest, so it's built around a character, person, something that makes it useful. You can't just give dull information. So for example, in my next slide now, which you may see, I say be careful when your guys go into this LGBTQIA, whatever people switch off. They don't understand. Even intelligent people like me sometimes say, what are all these letters do? My role in branding is, and I remember even when we did a Singer those days only had numbers. So it was model 243561. We became the first country in the world that put women's names and everything. The market shot up by 30-40% by just putting a human name on it. You'd think, why, what a silly thing, just a name, is it going to make a difference? So we found brand personalities and we did it. It was a woman's product. We put women's names, and it seems a silly thing, but little things work sometimes. You have to find what those things that can make a difference in the market. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Shall I get on, or is there any more slide? Okay, so one of the things you have to do is a principle in communication called the KISS principle. It stands for keep it simple, stupid. I'm not calling you stupid. I'm saying that keep it simple and almost so that even someone stupid will understand. It's so important, right? So when we are trying to discuss with people intersectional theory, Soji, Dahot, all these things, right? Gender identity, you're going to lose people. You'll have to slowly bring those in. And let me give you another big example from the development world, because I did a lot of work in HIV/AIDS communication, as I said, with the Commonwealth, right across Africa to everything. We wrote some strategic plans and I helped there. So for a long time, the UN system would not, because I think there was a Christian Catholic lobby somewhere in that whole UN system, they didn't allow for words, the proper words be used about sex and condoms, and they were even not allowing people to keep condoms out in Africa. So they used to say that body fluids that it was the mixing of body fluids that caused HIV/AIDS in a lot of their communication. So that's a vague term. Body fluids can mean. Then they were worried by people now in Sri Lanka. At one time, people thought that tears, anything, sweat, if that even touched, it would be enough. I remember when Sirasa did a program, and Sirasa was trying to help. So they were doing an AIDS awareness program. But they got the person who had HIV/AIDS, they put him in a mask, well, maybe for his own protection or whatever. So he was blacked out like a criminal. He had a mask so that you couldn't see his face. And then later I heard that the cameraman and the people, because he broke down and cried while he was giving his testimonial, they had actually burnt that piece of cloth because they're so scared that they'll get HIV from that piece of cloth, right? But if you don't communicate sensibly, yes, people are going to think like that. People will misunderstand because anyway, it's something that you are feeling, there is shame, there is stigma, there is revulsion. There are all these negative feelings which are anyway preventing you from getting a message properly. So the simple thing is, please keep messaging as simple and as human, at a human interest as possible, but don't use jargon unless absolutely necessary. So this is an example. I hope it plays and I hope you can hear it.
Shehara, I don't think we can hear it, Shehara.
Can't hear?
We can't hear. I mean, can you all hear? No, right? No, I can't hear it.
Okay, skip it. I'll skip it. It's there on the link that can be shared later. Okay.
Yeah, anything Shehara has forwarded to me, I have put it on the resources page. I know all of you are sending me messages right now saying it's really interesting that you all want links to it. Please refer to the resources folder that I have created for y'all, where y'all have access to any and all of what Shehara has shared so far. Thank you so much. I'll go on.
Okay, so the video I shared, again, they use these words, right? So there are all these acronyms. You know what an acronym is? A couple of letters put together to stand for something or the other, right? So sexual orientation and gender identity or something is SOGI and so on. So, but this is something they did for international, I don't know, something like Gay Rights Day or something like that. That's what Ida Hot means. But it's so boringly done. This bald-headed man is sitting and talking in a funny accent. This thing, I mean, Million has a lot of money if they want to do something properly. And they say there are 3 things you need to learn. It's not, but it gives you some facts. So I wanted you to know the facts. But watch it sometime later. So let's start with some stories. Is anyone brave enough to give me their story a little? Just, I know some of you shared because you all were presenting, but is there anyone who wants to share a story of how they have tried to project themselves? Just a short, maybe 2 minutes of their time about any issues they've had.
May
Hi.
I? Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
You go to Shara and I can go next.
Hi, my name's Tarsha and I'm 18. I kind of started social media around 2 years ago. And I really didn't think it was going to be a big deal because it was just me like wearing makeup or just exploring my sexuality. And then suddenly I started like getting a lot of attention. And I thought it would be an amazing way to like kind of normalize homosexuality because I grew up without having someone that looked like me or represented any of my values on social media, and not having that kind of role model to look up to, it made me feel very alone. So my entire goal through all of like the activism I've been doing or social media is just so that another queer kid can see me or sees someone like me and is able to not feel so alone, and putting myself out there and taking all the opportunities that I can get to kind of spread the word has really made a huge impact in what I thought was like Sri Lankan society, because I never thought that I would be able to openly say that I was gay on newspaper articles or magazine covers or on the internet in general. Like at one point, I thought I'd have to fake my death to get away from my family. But my opinion of that is completely turned around, and social media is just such a I thank social media for giving me like such an amazing opportunity to like actually be myself openly on the internet. Yeah.
See, that's wonderful. So that's the classic example of where a lot of the people who've been successful, especially in the arts and all, I have a story I share later, but they all start with somebody has seen now, like seeing you out there, and it gives them some confidence. They are not alone. There's another person like me who feels like me. It's not so odd. I'm not such a freak. I'm not, I don't have to go into some freak show. You normalize it in a way by being out there. And if you have the courage to be out there, and if you find 4 or 5 other people, you must be finding people who also, call you all sorts of awful names and, try to make you feel bad. But eventually the people who will keep listening into you or your stories or wanting to talk to you will be other people who identify with you. So that helps. And that's one of the best ways. Be yourself, be who you are, projective. Don't overdo anything initially. And then gradually, your character forms and you become comfortable in something. And there is no better way, really. Okay, if I'm just to move on from there, I'm going to rush through, but this is again to show you that there is a lot of science in this. There are techniques that are used in managing brands. There is a blueprint. There are ways in which a brand is engaged by the behavior it does. And there is a strategic template which we try and do, which establishes a brand. Now, very few people do it. Someone just goes to an ad agency and says, Mata, show me a logo. And somebody else says, shall we create a tagline? Somebody else says, shall I now shall I start creating some content? But whether in any form of media, you may want to start by saying you look at the context of the world, you look at LGBT rights, you look at the situation, you look at a certain demographic, and you try and understand. You're coming in as a social media radio station or an online thing or a blog or whatever you are trying to do, or you're selling a certain kind of thing, or you're just being yourself even, and you're out there sharing stories. Whatever you're doing, using a format like this, understanding who your community is, what your strengths are, what your flair is. Are you an artist? Are you a writer? Are you none of those? Are you just a shy person who still wants a story told? Do you need help, therefore, with someone who's better with words or song or whatever it is? And you gradually become something, right? And you navigate this. So this format is there. And maybe in a different time and place at some point, I can try and take you through this in detail. But this is just to show you that properly guided brands can make a huge difference. It goes on. So you have your target audience, the brand experience, how people will perceive you, what and why would they find you. So say you're trying to do something where you're not just trying to talk to your community, but you're trying to talk to, I'm sorry, my dog is barking, give me a minute. So if you're talking to people who really are in a totally different space, have no understanding about your feelings, your hurts, your insecurities, your the fact that sometimes, you know, you just want to curl up and die kind of thing, or the trauma you're having around, parents who are fighting about this, maybe other situations, fathers and mothers fighting, violence in the house, anything that's frightening you and creating havoc around you. And how or why would anybody interested in any part of this story or of you, you know, are you portraying yourself as some sort of sad human being who's just totally kind of messed up? And what would the appeal be? So some people who are messed up might, some people who are kind might be interested. But other people might say, you know, this is too much for me. I just can't handle it. I don't want, I want to hang around with a different type of people, or this is why I said this is all unnatural. And these people are, you know, mental cases or things like that. So you have to, in this need to project and express yourself, you have to understand and get into other people's shoes who you're trying to talk to. And then from that point, try and understand, so how are they seeing this? How do I at least break down one or two of the negativities? So there is therefore kind of a value proposition or a set of values or a set of ideas or set of things that you want to, and it's easy to talk of rights and diversity and fairness, but those are, you know, all just terms unless you can break it down to something that's meaningful to them. So again, this is a lot of theory, but for those of you who want, I can explain later that it breaks down finally into 4 things. So there are people who act and behave in a certain way. There'll be ways in which you communicate that. There will be a larger vision of what you're trying to express or where you're trying to go from where you are. And then there is the environment, the channels, the touch points, or the spaces in which you are trying to operate. Let me give you one more example from an international brand. So ultimately, all this theory comes down to one sheet of paper, and that's kind of like a brand statement. Now, this is Apple. Apple's brand personality. It came in wanting to be crazy, a misfit, a rebel, a troublemaker, a round peg in a square hole, the one who sees things differently, not fond of rules. So they were coming in as that fighter contrarian brand because that was hip and cool. An entire generation of sort of people, the millennials and all who were probably and the Gen Xers initially, were people like this, so this message appealed to them. They had done enough research, and so they were coming in as a technology breakthrough product, very heavy on design, but they write a story like this. So once you finish doing that other sheet of paper that I had asked to be circulated, see whether each of you can write your own brand mantra. If you were to define yourself in a page, what would it be? Everybody can't be a rebel. Everybody can't be a maverick. You may have been thrust upon to be a rebel in some ways, because anyway, the act of homosexuality or queerness or anything is an act of rebellion in most societies. But that may be not what you're comfortable with, and then you have to try and find a more moderate positioning where you can navigate through society. Let me give you 2 more quick brand stories, and please raise your hand up if you want me to stop talking. How many of you have used the soap Kohomba? Hello?
I have.
Yeah, lots of hands up. Okay.
Yes.
So let me tell you what I had to do with Kohomba. It's a very interesting story. Kohomba was a nowhere brand. It was owned by a company called Swadeshi, which is the oldest soap company, but they didn't even have 1% of the market. I don't know, they were selling very little. I went in there as brand consultant, and Lux was really doing very well. So Lux's positioning, as you all know, it hasn't changed, I think, across the years, was a soap of film stars. So we did an analysis, a behavior analysis, and we talked to people, young people, and we asked them what they felt about film stars. And we came up with a very interesting insight. We understood that basically everyone likes to look like a film star, but there was a clear thing that Sri Lankan men, for a star, would like to sleep with a film star, but never would want to marry one. Right? So she is the girl you want to have as a Horagani, or that girl you have as a mistress, but never your wife. Clearly, all of them were utterly had a kind of fantasy sequence of a Sea Devi Sinhala woman, by and large. Sea Devi came out, this Ahinsaka Sea Devi woman. Now, to me, I translated that because we need visual prompts and brand personalities. It was someone like Vasanthi Chaturani in Gangadhara, two plats, innocent, virginal looking. So we actually went, this is what I'm saying, sometimes there is those, we actually went around looking for a virgin looking like very pretty face, an unknown face. And I came across Yashoda in a magazine long before she was a magazine, and we gave her her first contract and built her up. From there, she went into acting. So that Kohomba woman was the first woman in the first commercial of soap, because it was a natural soap, nature-friendly soap, that moved the woman out of the toilet and took a woman which didn't have makeup and who had hair not combed, and put her out in a Diyaredda, in a stream, the boy-girls meet sequence and what have you. And we had a whole series of this. The girl and boy never really seemed to touch. She was always mooning after her. We looked at different film sequences from all over the world. We found Sophia Loren in the wet look. So Sophia Loren was much more sexy. But all these things come in cultural ways in which heroines are built. We looked at all these things and we took Kohomba. Then we went in and layered it in Kataragama, because there are Kohomba trees, but we wanted a religious motive subliminally there. So this simple soap was layering all sorts of things. For 5-6 years, they ran the same commercial, and that simple commercial took the brand from nowhere to the largest growing category and a market lead. Eventually, Rexona, a different brand which is in that category with Unilever, was destroyed. And even brands like Lifebuoy and everything went into green and went into these sort of natural organic kind of look. So that's how much, if you can get into things like little icons here and there, look at cultural motives, look at where you set things, look at the kind of face, and look, all these things matter, and you manipulate it. I'm not saying that it is so important that we stressed on a virgin-like woman, but if men wanted a certain kind of untarnished, ahinsaka Sridevi look, so be it. We created it. And that's what brand building and storytelling is about at a communication level. As long as you are not being totally unfair and you want to create a perception, you use every social trick, the more you know about society, more you know about behavior, the more you know about culture, the more you know about the way subliminally you can influence people. All these things matter. Any questions? Hello? Hello? Any questions?
Wake up call. Hi, guys.
All going to sleep, huh?
Hello, hi. No questions. Just is Kohama baby same as the Kohama itself, or that's different?
No, that's different. In a way, it's a brand extension, so they also went into the baby area. But it started off because it used Kohomba, right, which is neem, and it was a natural product. And they were going to, so we took the brand equity of natural. So we created a natural woman. We brought it outdoors. We took out makeup and the sophistication of, and we hit Lux, which was the play at that time. You're going back 15, 20 years, right? But this is how brands, products are built. This is how society is moved. It seems silly that these things work, but they do. You people have certain pictures in their head. The world's biggest brand, for example, was Marlboro for a long time. Had the largest brand equity for about 100 years. It was almost big. It was a cigarette, and they had an entire campaign which was men on horses. Now they had studied all the early films of how heroes, open roads, everything, the comic books which had heroes.
But they say the Marlboro is very, very harmful. I'm sorry for interruption.
I know. So these, I didn't build this brand. I'm just telling you, these are stories of how people manipulate perceptions of identity, of everything, right? So it's an example. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm just saying they studied films, they studied heroes, they looked at ways from comic books to at that time, in that era, it was all horses. You wonder why. Then eventually they took the horse to a motorcycle. But they are trying to get people to do things or based on, they are using communication techniques. I agree, a cigarette is not a good product. That's a different issue. I'm just giving you an example, right? This will be something much more that you'll like, and I'm really, really sad if you can't watch this. I'm wondering whether by any chance you can...
Shehara, actually, if you could possibly go to your sounds and click on computer audio as well, because I think it's only on speakers for you. But if you could just click on computer audio as well, I think we could hear the video that you
put sound, yeah? I'll try that.
Yeah. Try and see if that's possible. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
So, Alison, it's an absolute honour to have you here at the Young Vic, particularly for those of us in the queer community who work and are part of the Young Vic. We're really, really overexcited, I think is fair to say.
I'm very excited too. I'm very honoured and happy to be here.
I'm intrigued to know who your first lesbian hero was. Mine was Audre Lorde. Yeah, I just felt represented by her, especially being a Black lesbian. I was like, I see myself in you. So who was your first lesbian hero?
Well, I think of this one woman, Joan E. Byron, who was a photographer, and I was very influenced by her work because she was taking pictures of lesbians and publishing them in books. And I'd never seen a picture of a lesbian. She had never seen a picture of a lesbian until she took a primitive selfie. And I just loved what she was doing, just taking pictures of these regular lesbians, all different kinds of women. And so she was kind of my hero, my role model.
Were there any other shows or novels or books that were particular influences?
In terms of coming out as a lesbian, no, there was nothing. You know, there were no lesbians. The first lesbian movie I saw was The Killing of Sister George. Have you ever seen that? Don't. That too is very, very dismal. But it was exciting just because I'd never seen a representation of a lesbian. I mean, that's so important, just to be able to see yourself, just to have a mirror of yourself.
I'd like to ask the question that I'm sure it's very difficult for you to go through an interview without having asked.
Oh, I know what it is.
Would you like to ask yourself the question? Can you tell us about the Bechdel test and how it became so popular, kind of the story behind it?
Okay, one day in 1985, I was in the early days of writing Dykes to Watch Out For, and I had a comic strip due, and I had no idea what I was going to do that week. And I had just had this conversation with a friend. We were talking about going to see a movie. And she said, well, you know, I have 3 rules about the movies that I see. 1, they have to have at least 2 women in them. The 2 women have to talk to each other about something besides a man. And I just thought that was brilliant. There were hardly any movies that fit those criteria. So I put that conversation just like verbatim into my comic strip. And then I forgot about it. But then years later, after the internet began, younger feminists somehow found that cartoon and felt that it somehow expressed ideas they'd been having themselves about filmmaking. I don't really know who started it or how, and it wasn't like I ever sat down and said, this is the Bechdel test. I decree it. It somehow just has gotten associated with my name. I think all those ideas are in like a room of one's own, for example. I think it's kind of a boiled down version of something Virginia Woolf said.
I guess I just wanted to sort of broach the topic of Pride, seeing as it's coming up to Pride in London. And I'm interested to hear about your first experiences of Pride and how you experience Pride now.
Well, they're very different. You know, my first Pride event was in New York City in 1981. And it was amazing. I'd never been around that many queer people. You know, that itself is a transformative experience when you are no longer just this one freak in the corner, but you're just like everyone else around you.
Alison, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming and chatting with us. It's been so interesting to hear your stories, and I can't wait to see the musical. Thank you.
So there you see an example of, how far the world has come.
Ekan ලෝකේ කොච්චර දැන් 1980 ගණන් වල ඉඳලා මේ වෙනකොට ලෝකය කොච්චර වෙනස්
40s. She's created one of the best Broadway gay shows.
ஆரம்பித்த இந்த போக்கு 40 வருடங்களின் பின்னர் ஒரு பெண்மணியை பற்றி
is the best way to really build awareness.
ஆக்கபூர்வமான நிகழ்வுகள் எவ்வாறு உருவாக்குவது என்பதற்கு மிக சிறந்த ஒரு
A little write up on her, but her story is very tragic. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can hear you.
Tragic. So she was queer, and she finally came out. And when she decided to tell her family about it, from what I gather, and I may have got this slightly wrong, but what I understood is her father had been a closet gay. He had never expressed it, but he was so upset with the drama going on of his daughter, what have you, he committed suicide. So she had to deal with a double thing, the drama at home related to no one accepting it, and the fact that her coming out actually precipitated her father, who was queer and had hidden it all his life and never told anyone, committing suicide. But then she channeled all that trauma and grief and whatever else that she was going through, which must have totally messed her up, eventually to great art. She started with a cartoon series and went on to create a fabulous award-winning Broadway musical. So I'm going to stop with this particular slide because I know there's a lot of media. So one more example of how we have to find, I don't know whether they are metaphors, whether they are ideas, and then find ways. Somebody, I think it was Eshan or somebody asked me the question about, so how do I create content, the relevant content? You have to find ideas and images that can cross over. I had to do a campaign out in saving the rhinos in Malaysia, the Sumatran rhino, a wonderful client called SOS Rhino. And I was, I tend to fiddle. I don't know whether you notice while I'm talking now, my hand is moving all the time, but I tend to, there's something on the table, I'll be fiddling with it, what have you. There was a piece of twine or something on the table while I was talking. And suddenly I got this flash of insight. I suddenly looked at this and we created a collateral which we sent out to both clients and to media, challenging them with a very, very clearly crafted out statement. This whole campaign won a Khan's nomination also. But eventually it triggered off the idea that this could be a noose or a lasso. So a noose is something that hangs someone, right? And kills something. Or a lasso is something that's a lifeline and can help. Said it's the same object and ask them, what do you want to be? Do you want to be a murderer or do you want to be a life giver? And we use this to stimulate them to point of moving and helping out and creating awareness. So it's all about ways in which you try and get under people's skins, you try and you get their attention, and you make some kind of pass on some relevant information that can in some way change their idea of something, because that's what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to change their perception of who you are, what you are, and what you stand for. All right, that's it. Would you guys like to ask me any more questions? I've talked for long enough.
I think this is the last half-hour session of this session, actually. So please, by all means, fellows, tear apart Shehara's mind, because she clearly has a lot to offer us in terms of expertise and knowledge. I really enjoyed this whole discussion, and I would really like to hear some more questions out there. I would actually like to ask a personal question, because we will also be handling maybe our social strategy going forward, FPAS. So we would like to know, like, when branding, when creating your voice and creating your brand, could you give us like 10 tips on how to be a cut above the rest, or maybe just to be heard and seen? How can we be not just like the mountain of people that are talking in the crowd, but rather stand out? How would you go across that? Just like a quick listicle situation.
There's no real rule book. I mean, there are all these templates and stuff, but if you're now asking about content, first is you have to keep it interesting, right? You have to keep it interesting, but just making things interesting by shocking doesn't work, particularly in this. You're trying to create understanding. So human interest approach is always good. Keeping things short and well written or creative with pictures and or using multimedia is helpful. Using real life people, having activities, having continuity and building it, almost like Lego blocks, bit by bit. You build up a present, you build up an identity. So it's the same part of some of those things. The storytelling is very important. The fact that you find creative workarounds and routes. The more you understand through research, not just data, research which goes into attitudes and issues. So if someone's deeply conservative and thinks that someone who's gay is muspentu or apala, or unlucky, or is bringing bad luck or anything, where do you begin a conversation? If you want a whole series of conversations around culture's perception around what's natural and unnatural. And you ask the questions, and everyone has to start thinking, what is natural? What makes, what makes someone say this is natural? God wouldn't have created it if you believe in a God. If you don't and you believe it's nature and whatever it is, it's anyway something that nature has created for good reason, right? And if you look at the animal kingdom, most of them are, they are homosexual or whatever it is. So there is procreation only, that you need a man and a woman, and even that's going out of the way. So I think if you are doing it from a position of being gay and LGBT, there is a subjectivity comes, and you're working with your emotions and your true life experience. So there is more authenticity, but there's also a lot more defensiveness that comes through. If you're doing it as an external support person who has some sensitivity but doesn't understand everything, then you use your own ability to look for things and try and understand, and use that same learning path to find what makes it interesting for me. How do I stay with this story? What are the things that will make a difference? And understand that with all these cases, it's about visibility, bit by bit normalizing. The more gay people and the more people you see doing normal things and having successful lives and not being all kind of, they are not freaks in some kind of circus, the more you're making it where people will just accept it over time. And the truth is that in the villages, at some level, they are less hung up about this and they might shout, Ponnaya and this and that. But deep down, there is a kind of tacit, passive, yeah, it's their kind of thing. So you need to understand, you have to understand the ignorance, you have to understand the religious piousness, and then figure out maybe this is the last group we handle, but let's talk to most people who at some point or the other would have met and have some friends at least and know some people who are like this and realize that they're lovely people.
Thank you so much, Shehara. I really enjoyed how you showed that you could be an ally and still be so effective in pushing out communication and resources like this, and how we could, because not all, so just like to inform you, not everyone in the participant list may be identifying as part of the queer community. Yes. So even strengthening an allies approach of how to basically understand how we could be a much better streamlined approach and being sensitive in according to like approaching it. So I really appreciate that, and I'm pretty sure our fellows appreciate that too. We've gotten loads of direct messages talking about how this is actually a really exciting session. If there are no questions,
there is another slide which answers a bit of the how do you develop a communication plan, and I have that.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, and I just would like, because I want to end on something upbeat, which goes to, so there's other stuff about different groups you have to get into teachers and schools, right? If you really want to make a difference. And then you better get around the teachers' heads. That's a big, big problem. Have you got 2 minutes? I'm going to tell you one quick story on the gender side.
Of course, no, you have 15, like more than time enough. I just thought that you were wrapping up the session. I'm so sorry. Please
yeah, no, I am. I suddenly realized that there were one or two things with your question that maybe I could think. So I was working on a USAID project most recently, and I got a call from one of the women's organizations wanting to do a gender program out in Ampare. So Ampare is a deeply conservative and predominantly Muslim area. They wanted to do this women's program. Now the women asked me whether we could get someone from the VTA TVEC sector who is what they call counselors. Sadly, the counselors are basically career counselors who don't know much about anything. But anyway, we got hold of the Ampare guy of that area, and we sent him also with a brief that he had to. Now, these are guys who have been trained by this American program on career counseling and everything, and they got certified and all that. This guy goes there and he sees these women from Colombo who have overthought it. So these 4 ladies have gone from Colombo. One has dressed like a typical Muslim with a hijab and everything. One has gone in a sari. One has gone deliberately again. She's wearing a pants. She's wearing pants and I think a small jacket or something. This man got into some kind of a frenzy. He was so upset that a woman has come in trousers. He decided that she was not a woman. And he got up and he screamed at the children and the audience. So his turn to think. And he said, you children have to understand, you girls, because this was 2,000 school children, all girls. You have to realize that it's a man's world and that you all are brought into the world for one reason. You all are like vahikikiri. You all are brought to find a mate and lay your eggs. Why am I telling you this story? I'm telling you this story because these are the idiots and the morons who are teaching our children, right? These are the perpetuating of these sort of values and this sort of close-mindedness that we have to deal with, right? So in any educational program, sending material won't do. My God, something triggers it off and they go off and the true self comes off. These are their values. So he thinks a woman's role imagine what he'll think of it. And anyway, he thought this woman must be gay because she was wearing a man's costume and wearing trousers, right? And so he thought that she was being culturally insensitive. Isn't it crazy?
It's absolutely crazy because in this day and age where non-binary and androgynous and all of us are able to we all wear mixed clothing, and clothing has no gender. So I don't understand how we are able to still cling on to such archaic and such archaic understanding and ideologies of how we perceive women. That is,
this is our school system. So these are the guys teaching our kids, right? Counseling them.
That's crazy. I mean, but I do agree with you, Shehara. Education is so important. I mean, that is what is embedded in our fellowship program as well, because we think education and awareness is one of the corner points of sustainable change and impact, especially in the media narrative. If we are able to change a mind, then we could be able to like domino effect into a much better shape. Totally agreed with you, Shehara.
Any other questions? Guys, have I confused you totally?
I don't think there's
not at all.
Everything was explained so well, Shehara.
This woman in the next slide.
So many of our questions.
Yeah, this woman in the next slide is also amazing. Google her and watch her. One woman has done so much to change.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I met her personally. God, it was one of the highlights of my life. Has anybody heard her speak?
Yeah, I mean, yes, on my part, yes.
Yeah, I
but
have.
Yeah. She's quite famous.
Yeah. There is a link on this.
Huge fan.
But really listen to her. She will tell you how the stereotype of a black woman, of being uneducated, of being savage, and how much she did to change it. One person.
Hello? I think Natalie. Okay, wait, I'll mute her. Sorry, go on.
So that's her. That's her. I won't play it, but it's there. You all can watch it later. There are data and infographics and things like that that media can put out. So this is something that shows the infographics. Yeah. This is of the West, but I don't know whether anyone has data for Sri Lanka. I certainly couldn't find anything.
There's only a limited, that's a problem. Another problem in the situation here right now is because data is quite, like the last time a UN report was done was like in 1990s, and there are a few current reports that have come out. And even then we're relying on very old data to make our assumptions and to understand how to handle a community that we know nothing of, because we have not had the access to relevant data. And as well, people aren't able to speak their truth or accept that they may be part of the queer community, especially outside Colombo, because there is not as much acceptance, or there would be discrimination, like outright discrimination in identifying as part of the community. So there is quite a big gap there, because without data, we aren't able to understand how to approach these matters, or how to even understand the true gravity or reality of the situation on ground. So yeah, I totally understand. The data may have not been, but I will definitely forward you some Sri Lankan reports that we've done on this matter, because even
colorful infographics in media and sensitizing people to now these figures are frightening. And you look at how near people are to suicide, and are there helplines, are there any networks, those sort of things. So whatever you all can do in that would be useful.
I mean, it would be good to note that all fellows, y'all should maybe look out for these queer organizations that are on social media, because right now, even the Jaffna Transgender Network put out a helpline. There are so many resources that are being churned out right now. But the thing is, they don't have the platform or the capacity to cater to everybody. So we, as change makers, as fellows of this campaign and of this program, we could take the initiative to maybe push this across, because it's not just about creating new platforms, but strengthening current and utilizing current mechanisms so that we can reach more people. So I would love to see that everyone does do that today. Maybe go follow a few, because there are like about so many organizations, from Equal Ground to NTN to there are smaller things like Queer Agenda. So there are so many organizations that are also present today as well. So maybe y'all should all exchange information between yourselves as well and help collaborate between the two so that you can strengthen your voices as well. All very amazing points, Shehara. Thank you so much.
Right, so finally, I'm just going to leave you with a famous song which has become kind of a gay anthem. There's an old guy singing it, but there are others who've sung it. I love the version that Shirley Bassey sings because I'm that generation. But it's been sung by all sorts of different, it's from a musical again. Let's end on this because you listen to the words, they're very uplifting. You all may not like the music genre because it's a bit old-fashioned, but
I am
well, there you are. Be who you are and be happy in it. No excuses.
I mean, that is what we want to spread across with this fellowship program, to authentically be yourself in this manner, not to compromise on who you are, who you love. I know it's very easy for a white man of that age to be able to be proud of who you are, and you are what you are, no matter what the world says, especially in this context. We need to talk about intersectionality of how we have our different struggles. But I truly hope that across the years, as we grow, we were able to truly be, I hope all of you all are now truly proud of yourselves, but that we'll all be okay with loving who we love, being who we are, and accepting any and all of what we may as a human race come to. Thank you so much, Shehara. You have been an amazing expert. We love the resources that you have put across, and I'm pretty sure that the fellows will go back and check on these resources, because they will be definitely using it in the future, and as well as we will be including it in the manual as well. Thank you so much, fellows. Thank you so much, Shehara. Thank you so much, the FPSL team, RFSU, and IPPF that have come in and present as well. Thank you so much, Shehara. Would you like to have any last words? I don't want George Hearn to take take your thunder right now.
No, yeah, I've said everything I have to say. That whole musical in itself is a gay rights thing, and it's really an anthem. Though he's a white gay guy, and it's his story saying, you know, I don't have to apologize or anything. I don't have to hide anywhere. I am who I am, and that I think is the approach everyone has to take. Difficult at times, but hopefully there are a few allies who will help you along the way. Good luck, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Not at all.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you.
Fellows and Shehara, please log into our FPASL social media. We're hopefully trying to blow it up a bit and see maybe we could have the possibility of having it in the future, more fellowship programs where y'all conduct these things, kind of, you know, let's see how this moves forward, and let's see how we can strengthen the voices in Sri Lanka. Thank you so much. I hope you have an amazing day and see you bright and early tomorrow.
Stay safe. Bye.
Bye.